because of the sacrifices made by AMISOM, Somalia is where it is today. We've made great strides and great achievements in political stability, in economic recovery, in social mobilization, and in building new hope in this nation. And because of the sacrifices made by the men and women of uniform of AMISOM, including our brothers and sisters from Ethiopia, the Somali people see today a new dawn, a new future. Based on that now, we are not talking about piracy or terrorism. We're not talking about insecurity or a nation in despair. We're talking about building a nation. We're talking about economic recovery. We're talking about debt relief. We're talking about job creation. We're talking about fighting terrorism and building a nation where resources are distributed in an open and transparent manner. We're talking about a nation back in an international arena. We're talking about nation reconnecting with international financial institutions. We're talking about a Somalia that has a big role to play in the region. And that is because of the sacrifices made by the AMISOM over the past 10 or so years. And we are very grateful. On behalf of the Somali people, we are deeply indebted. In terms of the role of Ethiopia and the AMISOM overall, because of their services and sacrifices, Somalia can now contribute to the overall economic growth in the region. If you see the economy of the country today, there's more stability in the economy. There's the lowest level in terms of inflation. There's a growth in the GDP. And we anticipate, with the cooperation we now have with the international financial institutions, when we reach the stage where we want in terms of arrears clearance and the long-run debt relief, with the vast resources our country has in terms of natural resources, oil and gas, fisheries, agriculture, and mining, this is the country which I think would have the greatest contribution in terms of economic growth for our region and overall on the continent. On top of that, what is important is the change in dynamics that is taking place in the region. And that, led by the major changes that has taken place in Ethiopia, we see that as a positive sign towards building new East Africa, new Africa. The change that has happened in Somalia, and the one since February 8th, election day, when our president was elected, and the recent changes that you see in Ethiopia and the progress and the cooperation that we are building in terms of economic integration, economic cooperation, economic resilience, but also changing the narrative in the past history and a past relationship. The understanding of a new leadership both understands that Somalia's success depends on Ethiopia's success and vice versa. That you cannot create jobs unless you see within the region. You cannot produce goods unless you see your market being in the region, which means that our interests are interlinked, they're intertwined. So that being a leader in Ethiopia or leader in Somalia or elsewhere in the region must take you to see the holistic necessity that today's world requires from us as African and East African leaders, and that is what we see. This is how I see Somalia. A lot of people have seen our country in between hope and despair for many, many years. My vision for Somalia is a very different vision. My vision for Somalia is that we are now building a nation that has a strong economy, building back our finance department, our central bank, working with international financial institutions, and we are at an advanced stage in terms of clearing our previous debt. We're building what we call inclusive politics so that every man and woman in this country can have access to free and fair election. We're putting in place a constitution that can work for every Somali. And on top of that, thanks to AMISOM, we need their support to help us in terms of us having a military that works for the Somali people, that can defeat terrorism. Our views, therefore, is that to defeat terrorism, you don't need only through military means. You have to have a good governance structures that work. you must have a system that creates hope for the Somali people. You need to fight corruption, and you need to ensure that you have a justice system that works. We have put a mechanisms in place. A Somalia with a vision that is based on the next 20, 30 years. Working towards that vision means that changing the entire region. Once our economy then starts moving, once we start rebuilding this nation, once we start tapping to the entire resources, rebuilding Somalia will need a lot of resources, both human and otherwise. But on the human part, we will depend on the region. Somalis are entrepreneurship skilled people. Whatever we produce, these goods will require market, and that market is in the region. You have, therefore, Somalis here in Somalia, our neighbors, the immediate neighbors, wherever you go, on our borders, you will find also Somalis. Across the world, you will find Somalis that are very well educated, who will now come back to the country to contribute. If the world, therefore, and the region sees what I see, you see a great opportunity. You see a nation that will contribute a lot. That is why I call upon our brothers and sisters in the continent to continue investing in this country so that we can bring back what this nation has been once, the biggest pride of the continent. Overall, otherwise, we call all our international colleagues and partners that the progress this nation has made needs to be sustained, and for that, we seek all your support.
When you evaluate the success of here in Somalia, particularly the AMISOM, the TCC troop contribute country and the police contribute countries, done very well so far. In this regard, we achieved so many milestones, what have been done so far, particularly in peace restoration, in establishing the local and the governmental establishment. In this regard, the AMISOM and the African Union established a good achievement so far, what has been seen. This is why the Al-Shabaab is now degrading in all activities, in key pocket areas. So not only a one troop contribute country like Ethiopia or others, all member countries has done so far. This is a good achievement, why Al-Shabaab is now degrading his activity in all areas of responsibility. So when you evaluate the performance of the AMISOM, so far it is so good. This can be achieved and maintained in future. In this regard, Ethiopia National Army was deployed, particularly in vast area, particularly covering approximately up to 75 area of the area. In this area of responsibility, Ethiopia troop achieved a very important things. Number one is degrading Al-Shabaab in all area of responsibility. Number two, working a joint operation with Somalian National Security Force, with local administrators, local elders, mosque leaders, engaging CIMIC approach. In this regard, Ethiopia troop done very well in all, particularly in Sector 3, in Sector 4, as well as in Sector 6. This is a very important engagement of our troop in area of responsibility. Particularly, winning the heart and the mind of the population is very important. From my perspective, and some others believed that they only operation. But operation is not only enough, particularly engaging the CIMIC approach, engaging with community, establishing local security administrative, establishing security apparatus in all, the police, the local governors should be very important to establish. In this regard, Ethiopia troop, what has been done so far, particularly in our area of responsibility, it is good. That's why the community is beside our troop in every activity. So this is a very milestone of achievement of an Ethiopian troop, I hope this is not only becoming as a chance, this is a background what our constitutions come up with a good picture. This is a populace, the popularity behind what our troop is done so far. When you evaluate the political situation in the Horn of Africa is very volatile because of its nature. The Horn of Africa has exposed with different interests because of the proximity to the Indian Ocean and the Horn of Africa. This is why Africans and African community is focusing particularly where this Al-Shabaab pocket is found. In this regard, African, particularly the very proximity area of our Africa, the Horn of Africa, is very engaged in peace and security establishment. That's why African member states decide to degrade this Al-Shabaab, the terrorist group in Somalia, becoming a peace and security in the Horn of Africa, as well as even symbolically it is achieved for the whole region. In this regard, the TCC, the troop contributing country, is committed, particularly in contribution of a troop, in logistics, in material capability so far. This will be continued and to be achieved in a very committed way. This achievement should be continued and it should be encouraged. That's why African member state is embarked on this approach. So that is a very good milestone that should be continued. This instability in the Horn affect the whole, not only the peace, the economic integration, people-to-people relation, and peaceful movement of people through the border region. So this is, that's why especially we Ethiopians are very keen to stabilize the area, because the peace and the security here in Somalia is heart and the parts of an Ethiopia for economic development, for democratic organization, development, and even for our peace, not for others. That's why Ethiopia is very keen and very interested because of the proximity of the front line of the neighbor countries. So this is, it is obvious if peace and security is not in a good position in the Horn of Africa, it affects in one way or another neighbor country, particularly we Ethiopians. Me, as AMISOM Chief of Staff, what I wanted to send a message is, number one, we have to embark and make sure that this terrorist group should be degraded fully in the peaceful of the Horn of Africa, particularly in Somalia, our brothers and sisters. Secondly, African people and African TCC country should also contribute more in material capability and do well in logistical effort. Thirdly, I will pass also for our partner to support by their own capacity in all, in contributing whatever they have, in sharing knowledge, experience, what they have. So we call upon all TCC country, police contribute country, and the other partners to support the Somalian brother and the sister to engage in more stability in the security area.